Yahweh wants his people to know that there is a non-Israelite who is going to walk in the footsteps of Dod. This is episode 5 of the YAHOWAH blog on the man from Edom. It is a story that is sparsely known, one of the most important prophecies found anywhere among Yahweh's prophets. This one in the great Isaiah scroll in Yeshayah in the 63rd chapter. And it speaks of a man who comes out of Edom at this time, doesn't it, Wookie? And yet I don't think there is even one person in a million who is aware of this man from Edom, who he represents, why he is coming at this time, why Yahweh asked his prophet to speak of him, why there was such a long preamble to his arrival in the chapters of Yeshayah, Isaiah leading up to this. You want to know, don't you, Wookie? See? Wookie wants to know. So as we embrace the prophecy presented in the 63rd chapter of Yeshayah, we find the following. Who is the one who comes at this time out of Edom in reddish garments from the sheepfold to gather, fortify, and protect? He is the one who is shown great favoritism and is treated with distinction on high and respected. Therefore, he is suitably adorned and arrayed, striding purposefully and forthrightly, with a sense of intensity and urgency in the abundance of his authority and influence, his qualifications and accomplishments. I am sharing this message accurately and honestly to liberate and rescue, deliver and save a great many. Yeshayah, Isaiah 63:1. The very fact that he is coming out of Edom means that he is not a Israelite. The fact that he is coming from the sheepfold to gather, fortify, and protect means that he has a specific purpose. The fact that he is shown great favoritism and is treated with distinction on high and is respected by the prophet and his inspiration, Yahweh, says he is one among many billions, very unique in his persona, attributes, attitude, timing, approach, and message. It is important for us to know because we were told, and there will be more to be said about this, that he is suitably adorned and arrayed, that he is dressed for the part, presenting himself in an unpretentious way, and yet coming across very confidently, because there is a sense of urgency and intensity associated with his message. He is authorized by Yahweh himself to influence his people, and his accomplishments and qualifications now speak for themselves. And then there is this amazing admission, one found no one else in the entirety of the Torah and prophets, where the prophet speaking for Yahweh says, I am sharing this message with you accurately and honestly because it will liberate and rescue, deliver and save a great many. Yeshayah, Isaiah 63:1. And that the man is from Edom, he would have to know who he is to get this done in such a profound, important way. So this could not be a surprise to him. He knows who he is. And since prophecy pertains to this moment, when I'm the only one who fits the profile and the only one who is engaged in advancing this particular mission while revealing the intent of Yahweh's pronouncement, the identity of the Hazeh, the one, is really beyond question and controvertible. There is no other candidate. And there's far more to this prophecy, as we're going to continue to learn, than just a man who arrives out of Edom at this time to save Israel. Because Isaiah has a lot more to say about him and about his relationship to Isaiah in particular. And that's important because Isaiah is the prophet of the Towrah. He is the prophet that, after 10 chapters excoriating his people's propensity to be religious and telling them how horrible that is going to be and has been for them, he introduces the Towrah as the solution. The one man inspired by the 7 spirits of Yahowah to write the Nesh sign that will be used to direct Yisrael's attention to that raised highway, Misalah, to God. My wife pointed out something yesterday, and I don't want to forget it, so I'm going to mention it here. There is one ramp associated with Yahweh's temple. It is the ramp to the altar where the sacrifices are burned. And it is this ramp, walking up to it. When you see it, you will see that there's 2 horns in front of it and 2 horns behind it. Those 2 horns are of the ram, the sacrificial lamb that was offered on Pesach. This would represent Dod to David, the one who volunteered to fulfill Passover. And then there are 2 horns on the backside of it, and those would represent the bull, who is the Edom Parah, this bloody ram out of the earth, who is a productive and fruitful bull. And it is the Edom Parah that represents the man from Edom. He is the Edom Parah. They're one and the same. And so this raised walkway that leads from man's corrupted world to Yahowah advances right through the sacrificial offering of the Passover lamb and the Teruah bull. That is the message that resonated with my wife, and I am not going to argue with it because I see it representing the very picture that Yahweh was painting for us. So as we continue, we find that Yahshua is really thrilled with this particular message. He is the man who, as a prophet, has poured himself onto the very pages of his prophecy. We get to know him and his response by reading what he was inspired to write, because Yahweh doesn't choose to use his prophets as if they were tape recorders, as if they were simply scribes jotting down what he said. They do scribe and record what he says, but Yahweh wants the prophet to convey his own thoughts, responses, insights into what God is saying and what he is seeing in these future prophecies, because it is through men like Yahshua that Yahweh communicates, and it is so much more effective when that communication is filtered through a person who sees what God wants us to witness and understands it and can contribute to the story. For example, there was no reason to tell Hosea to marry Gomer, the temple prostitute, if all Yahweh was going to do is use him as a scribe for his revelations to his people. He wanted Hosea to become part of the story, to have empathy, to augment what Yahweh was saying by responding as a fellow human, but one who was enlightened and understood. It adds flavor, context, emotion to the message. It's one of the reasons why Yahweh has asked me to move beyond writing so many books. As you can see, I've written 36 of them. And one more book wasn't going to make a whole lot of difference, although I'm actually sharing this with you from a 37th book that I'm writing. It's Coming Home 4. But what matters is now Yahweh wanting us to speak directly to his people, because the human voice, the expression, the gestures, the setting, the tone, the cadence, all matter. Yahweh wants his testimony and his revelations filtered through a human voice, because that way his people are in a better position to understand it and have it resonate with them. And so at this point, we're going to see Yahshua interject himself into the story. He has just witnessed the arrival of the man from Edom. And it is a man that he has spoken of all the way back to his 11th chapter, as he introduced the Towrah, this one who is not only the club that Yahweh was going to use, this rod, to execute divine justice against those who have harmed his people, particularly against the religious, but also as this source of new growth, a branch off of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and as a stem off of Dod's tree of lives. And so Yahshua is going to project himself into the story, and having labored alone and having seen no results of his efforts during his own lifetime, having the door to heaven opened by Yahweh in his presence and seeing no one outside, then witnessing Yahweh's long search through the chasm of time over the course of 2,700 years, 27 centuries, and finding no one to help, no one to listen. And all of a sudden now, the man from Edom finally arrives. The prophet is overjoyed. So he asks, what can be known of your apparel? Of it being red. Is that your garments are similar to those who tread within the winepress. By the way, this is not asking a question, it's making a statement. What can be known of your apparel is that it's red. Your garments are similar to those of one who has tread within the winepress. Isaiah 63:2. Then he says, I myself have tread at the wine vat, but I've done so alone. Among the people, there was not a single individual with me. And so all of my apparel is defiled and it's stained, it's ga'al, it's unclean and discolored, polluted, and desecrated. That's insight is from the Great Isaiah Scroll 1QISA, because the Masoretic text includes some angry and bloody remarks as opposed to defiled and stained. All, by the way, is very similar to the word that speaks of a kinsman redeemer. This is 63:3. Therefore, I was inclined to pursue in my best judgment a day of recompense, because the year of my redemption had come. 63:4. Having continuously looked and having found no one to help, I was devastated. I felt abandoned. So when there was no one to provide any support, my Zeroah, the strengthened arm sowing and distributing my seeds while cultivating a productive harvest, well, he is the one who will deliver victory for me, bringing salvation through me, even through my disappointment and emotional turmoil remain. 63:5. Let's go back to the beginning here and consider this a very emotional appeal, profoundly important appeal. It should go right to the heart of everyone who knows this testimony. It should pierce the heart genuinely and stir the mind. Why God's most prolific prophet would say these things. So he's just announced the arrival of this man from Edom who, in conjunction with what Yahowah has revealed, because Yahowah told the truth about him, that he is going to save a great many. And he said that there was something unique about his clothing, that he was properly attired for this mission. And so he says, what can be known of your apparel is that it's red. It's Edom. Remember the Edom Torah? Bloody red man of the earth? This bull who was productive? Edom is from Esau, which is also related to this red color, hairy and red. The color of his apparel is red. Not red by accident. It's not red by coincidence. It's red for a lot of reasons. One is that he's coming out of Edom, and Edom is symbolic for Rome. He is not representing Rome. Of course, he's walked away from Rome. It's just like Abraham and Sarah came from Babylon. They don't represent Babylon. They walked away from and out of Babylon. Moshe came from Mitzrayim, Egypt. He did not represent Egypt. He had walked away from the religious and political influence of Mitzrayim, Egypt. Exactly the same is true with the man from Edom. But Rome is the country most known for its red, for being associated with hairy, because that's the Latin word for Caesar. Caesar means hairy. Hairy and red. Edom is a metaphor for Rome. Imperial Rome, particularly, is that your garments are bloody red. Edom. Tying into the Edom of Torah and associating him with where he's come from. But most importantly, he's tread in that wine vat with Yahowah. He's gotten right in there with him. And ultimately, he's slaughtered. Just as was the Passover lamb. That's why I shared that metaphor, the picture, if you will, of the ramp, the Missala that leads up to the altar where the remains are burned. Because during the sacrifice of the Edom of Torah, That's going to be the greatest show on earth. And it's going to take place in exactly that vessel with the four horns, the two representing Dode, the two representing myself as the bull. And so I will be a bloody red mess. So my garments are similar to the one who treads within the winepress. Yeah, for those who thinks, boy, that's presumptuous for him to assume that he is this person. I'm not making any assumptions. I know I'm this person. There's no other candidate. And I'm a perfect candidate in the sense that I meet every one of the criterion. And I'm the only one who meets all the criteria. But it isn't to brag. This job comes with a rather painful burden. There is the point on Towrah, the day of the herald, where I'm bludgeoned to death by the most heinous adversary in the history of our planet, Hasatan. So don't think for a moment that I take this role lightly. I know my future. And I know how difficult it is and how unrewarding it is, at least among men, to try to awaken Yisrael, to get Yisrael to come out of its stupor, to stop being so arrogant and intransigent towards Yahweh. God spoke directly to them, and they told him to shut up and go away. They erased his name. They removed Yahweh from their lives. They have no clue as to who Dode is or what he has done. And my mission is to get their attention, which is very hard to do, and then convince them that what they have done the last 3,450 years has been entirely wrong, and that Yahweh, through me, is telling them the truth. On my feed this morning on Facebook, there was a rabbi who was saying, Christians ask me what I think of Jesus Christ. And he started off pretty well. He said, what I tell them is there was nobody named Jesus in the 1st century CE. It's not a Hebrew name. It's not even a name that was used because there was no J until the 17th century. He didn't mention that part, but it was very matter of fact, yet there was no Jesus. They did not have a Hebrew name, and he would have been a Jewish person, so there could not have been a Jesus. And he said, Christ is wrong too. There was no Mr. Christ. Christ is a corruption of another title. And so there was no Jesus Christ. And so he said, I believe that a man actually came at that time that was a Jewish individual, and that he was an important person to know, but he wasn't your Jesus Christ. And that was it. So I wrote back, I said, well, you're right. There was no Jesus. You're correct. There was no Christ. But you have no idea who it actually was that came. It was David during his second of 3 lives. He is the Messiah, according to God. He is the Son of God, according to God. And he himself predicted exactly when he was going to arrive to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim, according to Dode, who is the Son of God, according to God. And yet, even though he wrote all about it, told you all about it, did these very things, and fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim, you don't know who it is. So you're right. Someone did these things. You're right. It wasn't Jesus Christ. But why don't you take the next step and accept who it actually was and is, who did these things for you? Yes, Dode tread in that wine press as well. And so the prophet says that I have tread in that wine vat alone, and he did. I mean, between Yahowah and myself, there were only 3 other individuals besides this return of Dode. But Dode on his return wrote nothing because he wrote everything we need to know about what he would accomplish 1,000 years in advance. And so it's only Yoel, Zechariah, and Malachi. Now, there's some overlap with Hosea and Yirmiah, so I'll grant you that. But essentially, from the end of Yeshayah's reporting, there were those three individuals, and they did not work together. And then there's me. And Yeshayah, at this point, as we have been reading, has been focused on the last days, and he's realizing that from his time to the last days, he's been treading that wine vat alone, trying to get his people's attention. There's a wine of inheritance, and they're missing it. And of course, wine is symbolic of blood, just as olives are symbolic of the Spirit, and grain is symbolic of souls. Wine is symbolic of blood, and there's two places where blood is spilt. One is on Pesach, and the other is on Towrah. Among the people, there's not a single individual with me. And this pronouncement is made throughout the prophetic revelation of Yeshayah. It is typically in Yahweh's voice. This time it's in the prophet's voice, with Yahweh saying, I looked, I searched, I found no one. There wasn't a single Israelite, not a single Yehud that was willing to listen to Yahweh, even embrace his name, reintroduce his people to his name, except Dode as the Son of God and the Messiah, the Savior. Study the Torah and prophets and put the entire picture together from beginning to end. Write these kinds of books. Devote themselves 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week for what will be 32 years. There's no one. And that's the reason why I was afforded this job, because I was the one. After a long period of no one. That means that I didn't exactly have to beat the competition, did I? I wasn't competing with rabbis. I wasn't competing with priests. I wasn't competing with theologians or kings or presidents. I wasn't competing with scholars. I was competing with no one. Because according to the prophet, according to God, among the people, there was not a single individual with me. And when I began, it was just Yahweh and myself. Over time, there are others who came to embrace the covenant that Yahweh was revealing through me and have contributed to our work together. I received an email today from a person that was the first to ask me to begin doing audio programs. The Yada Yahowah radio was his idea, and I've done probably 10, 15,000 radio programs, either as a guest on syndicated talk radio shows or my own Shattering Myths, or on Yada Yahowah radio over the years prior to the YAHOWAH blog. And he was the person that asked me to do that originally. And he said, I don't like the fact that you're reading from a teleprompter. I think what you need to be doing is to have someone who can ask questions, and you have an interview set up. I haven't written him back yet, but maybe this will serve as the answer, since he watches these. First of all, in this studio, there is no teleprompter. Second, when it comes to Yahweh's testimony, it took me a long time to translate it. There's an enormous effort that goes into it. And I am not going to wing it. I wrote it. I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to make certain that I give you my best effort as it relates to what God said. Third, about 80% of these programs are extemporaneous. I'll read something that Yahweh has said, that he once conveyed, and I will speak to you about it. Just like the prophet is doing here after Yahweh revealed the arrival of the Adamah Parah to him, the man from Edom, the prophet is sharing his thoughts. About 80% of these programs are me sharing what is flowing through my mind as I'm conveying these ideas to you. But most of all, the man from Edom is singular. The Towrah is singular. Yahweh's Bashar, herald, is singular. Yahweh's voice, kol, is singular. The peh of Yahweh, mouth, is singular. The individual that receives the seven spirits of Yahweh, he's singular. The Nakar and Nakri, observant foreigner, is singular. Yada is singular. The Adamah Parah is singular. The Malak, through whom Yahweh is speaking at this time as his messenger, is singular. The final Zeroah, correct, singular. As the kol voice of Yahweh, it is my responsibility to speak to you this way. It is Yahweh's instructions to turn on the lights, change the logo to his light, look into the camera, look you directly in the eye, and speak to you heart to heart, mind to mind, and to tell you what you need to know as to the best of my ability, having devoted 24 years to studying Yahweh's testimony, translating it in amplified fashion, deducing thousands of previously unheralded insights, and being the first person to put the whole story together from beginning to end. This is what he's asked me to do for you. This is the purpose of the one who comes from Edom to save many. God did not choose many voices. He chose one voice. And so we will continue this way. Well, there will be variations of programming in the future where we try to implement multiple cameras and multiple microphones and a mixer. And we actually record these and edit them a bit and buff them up some and produce them through a different online program than we're using now. We're using StreamYard currently, and 100% of what you are seeing from me is a live stream. There are no edits of any kind. We turn on the lights, on the camera, we cue the show. I sit down in this chair and speak to you. I think that's a lot more credible, personally. I think Yahweh does too. It's what he asked me to do. It's what I'm doing for you. And among the people, there was not a single individual with me. And so Yahshua is saying, all of my apparel, it's defiled and stained. He says, I have been treading in this wine vat so long with no avail. My own apparel is unclean because, well, up to this point, it hasn't had merit. It hasn't delivered the life that it was designed to convey. He says, therefore, I was inclined to pursue my best judgment, in my best judgment, a day of recompense. He was angry. He was angry. He wanted a time to inflict retribution and revenge for those who had worked against him. He begins, his first 10 chapters are all to denounce the Jewish propensity to be religious, if we're to use the term Judaism. And yet, still, Judaism persists. There are probably 100,000 rabbis to me. And there are millions of Jews who are Orthodox, Reformed, or Haredi Jews. And they've all corrupted this message. The progressives have ignored it, and the religious have corrupted it. And YAHOWAH is upset. Righteous indignation. He wanted a day of recompense. Maybe why Towrah is introduced as more than just a branch. It's a stick. And it's the stick that whacks the tree for that final gleaning. Olives, which are the final gleaning, the way that olives were harvested is you took a stick, a branch, and you whacked the tree with it to get the olives to fall off. And that's why the Towrah is both a stick to implement divine judgment, as well as a branch offering new life. And so, having worked alone and having seen his people work against him, he said, I was inclined to pursue in my best judgment a day of recompense. Then he recognized that the year of his redemption had come. Bo, just as he uses Zeth, Bo, Men, Edom, to describe this one who comes from Edom at this time, he uses Bo again here. It's not by happenstance. What he is saying here is that the year of his redemption came at this moment, the moment the man from Edom arrived. That is YAHOWAH's redemption. Why is it YAHOWAH's redemption? Why would anybody care about YAHOWAH's redemption? Because he was the most prolific of the prophets, the most emotive of all the prophets. He's the prophets with the most advanced vocabulary. He's the prophet who not only told the entire story of beginning to end of his people, from their religiosity ultimately to their inclusion back into the covenant relationship, he revealed the implement that would make this possible. The Towrah, the Bashar, the Nakar, the final Zeroah, the man from Edom, the Adam of Parah. He is the one who describes all of them and provides the textbook on how to effectively do this job. And because YAHOWAH's name means Yahweh saves, the method that Yahweh has chosen to save his people in the end arrived and is present through the arrival of the man from Edom. And because YAHOWAH is the one revealing this, because YAHOWAH is the prophet of our salvation, YAHOWAH sees personal redemption in my arrival. He knew that I would translate and study and analyze and scrutinize every letter of every word he wrote, and that I would be the first to figure it all out, to recognize who he's talking about, when these things are going to transpire, through whom, why, where, and to also present the result. Yahowah is vindicated. This is the year of his redemption. You are witnessing the redemption of the great prophet now. In his lifetime, no one listened to him. But in mine, all who are to be saved, in the final remnant of Israel, and even Goyim, will be saved, a great many, all because I listened to him, and I've shared what he had to say, so now you are listening to him. That's why the Towrah is not a prophet. He had a prophet. God's really brilliant when he executes his plan. Here's two people. Their lives separated by 2,700 years, and yet they work like this. Right at the perfect time. Having continuously looked while having found no one to help, Yahowah admits, I was devastated. I felt abandoned, and he should have. He should have felt devastated and abandoned. No fault of his own. No one wrote more brilliantly about the great chasm of time from the moment Israel failed in the relationship with Yahweh because of their religiosity, and he was really explicit. He even has places where Yahweh says, I am so goddamn tired of your festivals and your sacrifices. I do not want another one of them. No. And it's because Yahweh has his own and they had theirs, and they were not the same. Very little correlation between the Jewish high holy days and their festivals and what Yahweh presented to his people. But Yahowah is the one that presents that in all of its glory, and then glory is actually the opposite. All of the great disgust and revolt, and then he introduces the solution, and he walks his people through that ultimate resolution. And he is also the one who positions Dode in the right place in all of this, because Yahowah and I are conduits for God's story. Dode is the fulfillment of God's story. We have value, and our words save many because we recognize what David did. That's why the 9th chapter of Yahowah is this soaring tribute to David. And why the 53rd chapter of Yahowah explains precisely what David, as the Messiah and Son of God, this Lamb of God, did on Pesach and Matzim, leading to Bikurim. So our ability to be effective is the recognition, both of us, on what Yahweh achieved through Dode. We are heralds of our King. We're important communicators of the message. But Dode is the king. And we know our rightful place under him. So having constantly looked and having found no one to help, I was devastated. I felt abandoned. So when there was no one to provide any support, my Zeroah. He knew there were three. He wrote about all three. He introduced the first Zeroah as Moshe, the one who conveyed the narrative between Yahweh and Abraham to form the covenant. The one who presents Dode as the Messiah, the one who tells us that Dod is the Lamb of God who takes away the guilt of many. He's recognizing that this Choder that he introduced in the 11th chapter, by the 17th, he presents him as the Zeroah, as the one responsible for the Shabuah harvest and the Teruah harvest, and yes, even the Teruah sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. He has recognized that the man from Edom is the Choder, and is also the final Zeroah. And he is so insistent on this that while he's talking about his Zeroah now, he introduced his powerful chapter explaining precisely what Dod David was doing with our guilt and carrying it away on Pesach and Amatzah. That he begins that narrative by saying, until you know who is the one who has determined the identity of the Zeroah, you're not in a position to understand what follows. And no one was. Not a soul on this earth prior to myself as the Choder, inspired by the seven spirits, figured out that Yeshayah 53, even Yeshayah 9, about the Son who is given to us, speaks of Dod and his fulfillment of Pesach as the Lamb of God. And I'm the first to figure out that Moshe, Dod, and myself are the three Zeroah. And so, while Moshe is the Torah's Zeroah, the strong arm of God, freeing his people, leading his people as a shepherd, and Dod is the ultimate Zeroah as the sacrificial lamb that fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. I'm Yashayah's Zeroah. He wrote the textbook on how to serve as the Zeroah. I'm the one sowing and distributing the seeds that Yashayah has sown, cultivating them for the productive harvest that he is the most descriptive of all the prophets in describing precisely when and how and where the Shabuah and Teruah harvests are fulfilled. 17th chapter again. He dates them. He explains them. He narrates them so that you know who it is that is fulfilling them. And so, yeah, I'm Yashayah Zeroah. I'm the one who got into the wine press with him. We're in this together. He is my prophet. I am his Zeroah. I am the strengthened arm sowing the seeds that he has sown, cultivating the productive harvests that he missed during his lifetime that he is now celebrating. This goes on to say, he will deliver victory for me by bringing salvation through me. And that's the truth, folks. He's the prophet. I'm the witness. And the reason that works is that Yashayah told the story so that we could understand precisely who was doing what, with whom, and when, even why. And so without him, none of this happens. I have no clue that I'm the Choder. We wouldn't even know of a Choder. We would not know, we'd have no clue as to the meaning of Zeroah. We'd be left stumbling all over ourselves in trying to figure out what actually happened on Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim without his 53rd chapter. We wouldn't recognize that Dod was the son who was given. And we would have no idea that Yahweh was going to deploy a witness in these last days, that he would be the man from Edom, the Adam of Parah. the final Zeroah, the Choder. And so what I'm communicating to you does not stand alone. Yahowah is my prophet. He spoke of me often. And that is because it is through me that his words are finally resonating with his people. We are delivering salvation together, both serving Yahowah and our King. It is a collaborative effort. He will deliver victory by bringing salvation through me, Yasha. Even though through my disappointment and emotional turmoil, and they remain. Yeah, I think that as joyous as Yahowah is that his words finally resonate in the end, I'm sure he's frustrated that nobody listened to him up to now. Why did God have to find someone to convey his testimony so that people would listen to him? And yet it was that way. Had I not done this, people wouldn't be listening to him even now. They'd be misappropriating everything he said and applying it to a misnomer, a crude counterfeit. And the prophet Yahowah has been so misconstrued and misappropriated by Christians on behalf of their crude counterfeit, this mythical misnomer, Jesus Christ, that most Jews don't want any part of it. Part of what I guess makes Yahowah so angry and so disappointed is that Paul, Shaul, a Jewish rabbi, robbed Yehudim of what Yahowah revealed. And as a result, Jews don't look to Yahowah for answers. When you speak of the prophets, that's not one they want to consider. In fact, most religious Jews don't really even speak of the prophets. They like to twist and misappropriate what Moshe said, but they kind of go from there. And if they're going to have a prophet, it's a false prophet like Job or Esther or Ezekiel. They stay away from Isaiah because, well, they don't like what he had to say because they don't understand it. And the most popular religion that has so bludgeoned Jews for so long has misappropriated it. So here we are. Yahowah is insistent throughout this that all who read what he has to say now, listen to what he wrote, realize that the man from Edom's clothing is red for a reason. And this is because the prophet has foreseen the sacrifice that the man from Edom will make, actually thrice over for Israel. He's going to protect Israel from bleeding to death during the time of Jacob's troubles, constantly putting himself in the line of fire to protect God's people from the savagery of Islam. Not a single Jew has ever risked their lives to expose and condemn the genocidal nature of Islam, or the fact that Allah created Islam to annihilate all humankind, beginning with Jews. Nor has anyone explained that Allah and Muhammad perpetrated genocide on Jews in Arabia, and how the events of October 7th were nothing but a replaying of what happened 14 centuries earlier. And so the one standing between Islam and Israel is myself, through goddamn religion and all of the programs that I do to expose and condemn it, and all of the effort, hours every day, thousands of posts drawing Israel's attention to their true enemy. It's not Hamas. It's not Palestinians or Fakistanians. It's not Gazans. It's not the Iranians. It's not Hezbollah. It's not the Egyptians. It's not the Saudi Arabians. They're all symptoms. The enemy is Islam. And Israel has no chance of surviving the Islamic assault that is coming without knowing who their enemy is. And so really that is my first sacrifice, because it is a tremendous sacrifice to play that role. It's why I begged Yahweh not to go back there, not to have to turn Prophet of Doom into goddamn religion. And Yahweh's response was perfect. I've taken care of you, now you take care of my people. But don't think for a moment that that's not a sacrifice. And this is occurring, of course, during the time of Yaakov's troubles. And I'm going to serve as the Edom of Torah, the bloody red man of the earth, who becomes particularly productive when allowing himself to be bludgeoned to death by the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan during Yom Teruah, the day of the herald. And yes, I said there are 3 contributions that I make, and Yahowah is aware of them. And all 3 revolve around blood, because Islam is the most bloodthirsty religion in the history of humankind. I constantly wrote throughout goddamn religion that from the inception of Muhammad's terrorist manifesto, there was a river of blood, but not a drop of ink. The first Muslims murdered 200 million people in their first 100 years, a third of the Earth's population at the time. And the sacrifice of the Edom of Torah is so bloody, he is named the bloody red man of the earth. That's why it's the apparel of the man from Edom is so important for Yahowah to convey. But there is a third bloodletting, because blood is the symbol of life. And that is, as Teruah brings in Yom Kippurim and Dod as our Messiah and high priest at this time, and king arrives, and he sprinkles the blood of a bull on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, on the Kipporeth, in accordance with the Torah's instructions, so that Yisrael, this final remnant of Yisrael, can be present in God's company. Since Yahowah had toiled in the winepress alone, he equated the color of our apparel, recognizing that wine is Yahweh's metaphor for blood, and there would be lots of it. And it is in the winepress that the grapes, which have been pulled from the vine, that is the symbol of Yisrael, are trampled and crushed in preparation for their transformation. And there is something really beneficial to wine, not just the flavor, not just the color. Throughout most of human history, humankind did not know that the reason water could not be consumed in proximity to herds of animals and in proximity to communities of people is because it would have pathogens in it. It became toxic. So water, the very elixir of life, the means of cleansing, the universal solvent, and this source of life from where life emerged, is also the conveyor of great pathogens, particularly in proximity to people. And so Guess what wine does during the fermentation process? The sugars and the grapes, when combined with the yeast, produce alcohol in small percentages. Typically, wine is about 6%, sometimes 12%. And it's those, in fact, 12, I think, is probably more the right number. Beer is 6%. In both cases, they remove the pathogens. They kill the little buggers that bring illness, sickness, and death. So there is a transformation that takes place in the wine that is also symbolic of making water, which is poured out over the carcass of the Edom Parah in that altar with the Mesilah, the raised ramp to it. It is water that is poured over those ashes that cleanse the people, because water as a solvent carries all of that away. And with this symbolic nature of wine, what we drink thereafter has been purified. And so now, after the passage of some 2,500 years, the prophet is announcing that the man from Edom has arrived to support not only his efforts, but to explain what he has written, to provide victory and salvation through the very text of the prophetic revelation of Yahowah. And wouldn't you know it, there's only one scroll from a single prophet that exists in its entirety. And it happened to be the first one that was found in the Dead Seas. And it was found right around the time I was born. The great Isaiah scroll. He wrote it. Yahweh inspired it. And I'm the voice of it. So this pronouncement, it's emotional for Isaiah, because for the intervening period, Yahweh revealed that there wasn't a single soul among Yehudim that was willing to do what must be done to call God's wayward family home. He had written a primer. I call it a textbook for proper chodering. But no one was the wiser for it. And then a day of redemption. The choder was established and empowered with the seven spirits of Yahweh to fulfill his destiny, which was to make the words that Yahowah had revealed so long ago resonate with his people at long last. You're witnessing the fulfillment. But, folks, this is no easy job. Israelites, you are a tough audience. And the world is rife with a lot of religious and political rubbish. I can tell you, and my wife will attest, that having to spend 4 or 5 hours a day on social media to try to break through and to get this message out to God's people, it's wearing. It really is exasperating. Those who engage with Yah are certain to be stained and stigmatized by the experience. Even today, as I was announcing that, and I wrote this at a day, it's one of 3 times that I pulled away from X to focus more on Facebook. The reason is because X is largely a cesspool. Fortunately, Facebook is more appropriate to convey this kind of message about Yahweh and his covenant family. It's just not a very good place to expose and condemn Islam. And nor is it a good place to push away all the trash that Christianity has slathered on top of the truth so that Yahowah's message would resonate again. So it is good for that one thing, but not good for the others. And X serves its purpose, therefore. And while YouTube is the great repository for all of these videos that we're doing as part of the YAHOWAH blog, and they play so beautifully on every possible instrument, from televisions to telephones. The fact of the matter is that's not interactive at the moment. Maybe it will be. And it's highly censored, as is, by the way, is X. The least censored now is Facebook. So we thank Mark Zuckerberg, a member of the tribe, for doing that. Clearly, the year of Yahowah's redemption has now arrived. The prophet's revelations are now center stage, restoring Israel to the covenant as he had hoped, as he had foreseen, as he had foretold. But while that's good news for the beneficiaries, the long line of naysayers who have precluded his message from resonating with his people, they're going to suffer a day of recompense. And Yahowah has thought through this from a long time ago. He's ruminated on this, and he has your number, rabbis. And there will be retribution. The prophet will seek vengeance against the religious and political leaders he impugned in his opening 10 chapters for all of the harm they have done over the ages by not listening to him or to YAHOWAH. Now, this is followed by one of the most emotionally compelling and mentally anguishing revelations in the whole of YAHOWAH's prophetic witness. Yahowah was devastated. He felt abandoned. There was no one to carry out his instructions or benefit from his testimony. He felt inadequate, astonished on one hand, and he was appalled on the other. What seemed so obvious to him, so beneficial for his people, was so continually and constantly overlooked and dismissed by Israel and Jews. But then, just when time nearly ran out, just 30 years from the planet being destroyed rather than restored, no one became one with the arrival of the one from Edom. And yes, he would serve as the final Zeroah, Yahowah's Zeroah. And so Yahowah is affirming that the Towrah branch will Zeroah, bear fruit, and cultivate a productive harvest by way of his revelations. And I will tell you that it wasn't until my most recent pass through Yahowah's 17th chapter, which I have translated and revealed probably 10 times through these 36 books that you see behind me, that I finally saw all of it transpire in the proper order. I was, at that moment, I recognized that it is the Shabuah harvest of standing grain, which is the purpose of the Zeroah at this very moment. And he was the one who told me exactly when it was going to transpire, which is at the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles, which means it's the Teruah 7 years before Dod returns with YAHOWAH, which means it's the Shabat of May 22nd of year 2026, just 14 months from now. And he is then the one who explained the two phases in the 17th chapter again of Yahowah, the two phases of Teruah that will follow. And he's the one who explained that it's the olive harvest that you need the stick to hit. He's the one who explained how the very crag, this my given name of God, will provide protection for the Israelites that are left behind, this mortal remnant of Israel that doesn't take advantage of that final ride out of the earth as children of the covenant on the evening of Teruah, so that against the backdrop of a full solar eclipse, there will be the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, which is then YAHOWAH who made this clear, that would happen on this date. And that's how we went from him introducing that in the 17th chapter to the 19th chapter of Numbers, the presentation of the Edom of Torah, which then led us to the result, which is the 5th chapter of Numbers, which is the preparation of the adulterous woman for the betrothal to the man who covets her, the returning Messiah, Dowd. And how we were even introduced to halfway in between in the 12th chapter of Numbers to the meltdown of Miriam, and how there would be a complete transformation in the team that would deliver this message to you. And while we're reminded that God chooses one man at a time to speak through, and anyone who would challenge him is diseased from God's perspective and ostracized from the family. This is very serious what God is conveying. And all of it was learned once I had spent 23 years studying the Torah and prophets and the Mizmor of Dowd, and had come finally to understand Dowd's role in the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and understood God's timeline, that a fresh reading of YAHOWAH, and it was all there. Every minute detail to explain exactly what I'm saying to you at this moment. This is the message of YAHOWAH, his children. The man from Edom who has gotten into that wine press with him. It is the one from Edom who is bringing YAHOWAH salvation to Israel by correctly conveying the message YAHOWAH had scribed so very long ago. The final victory will be achieved because salvation is the result of the one from Edom advancing the prophet's agenda and his revelation by following the instructions as inspired 27 centuries ago by YAHOWAH. This is probably a good place for us to conclude this episode of The Man from Edom as part of the YAHOWAH blog. I thank YAHOWAH for inspiring YAHOWAH, and I thank YAHOWAH for the patience and the devotion to serving as the prophet of the final Zeroah, of the one to introduce the Choder, and the one to herald the arrival of the man from Edom, so that not only would I understand my responsibility and be prepared to uphold it, but so that Yisrael and Yehudim might know that at this time it is their responsibility to listen and to respond accordingly. Thank you.